So welcome to this meeting of the Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes Fire Authority, which is delighted that we're holding in the city of Milton Keynes. Can I just draw people's attention to this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded onto the authority's YouTube channel following the meeting. So first we have apologies for absence.
Yeah, there's councillors Bagg, Carroll, Chappell, Christensen and Hussain.
Thank you. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Councillor Mahendran to the authority. Welcome. Good to have you on board. We are required to appoint Councillor Mahendran to the Overview and Audit Committee and also to appoint Councillor Emily Darlington onto the Executive Committee. We're all happy to concur. Agree. Thank you. Moving to minutes of the last meeting. Are there any questions as to accuracy on the meeting minutes? We're happy to approve them. Councillor McLean.
In the list of attendees, I'm not listed. I did check on the video, and I was there.
That's been noted. Apologies, we missed you. I'm really not sure how that happened. You're not somebody we normally miss. Any other comments on minutes? We're happy to approve them. Okay, thank you. So moving on to matters arising, which is in the new rather helpful format. So I'll just talk through and then come to either officers or members where needed. So the first matter arising related to High Wycombe Fire Station, the lead member for Finance and Assets to report back on the improvements to the station, which were due to be completed by the end of March 2023. Is there anything you want to add, Councillor Walsh, yet, or should we wait until the March meeting? Thank you. Next action is the on page 15 FA35 White Ribbon accreditation process. Chief Fire Officer to ensure it was raised at the next meeting of the Thames Valley Collaboration Steering Group. It was indeed raised at that steering group. Is there anything you want to add? No, thank you. Procurement strategy. FA37 Procurement Manager to give the Overview and Audit Committee updates on social value progress, and that's going to a future meeting of the Overview and Audit Committee. FA40 Health and Safety Advisor to run a report on underlying causes and split between actions taken by an individual or anything that the organisation would need to highlight to reduce injuries for future reports. And the Chairman requested that future analysis incorporated data on protected characteristics. The lead member for Health and Safety Corporate Risk has been updated and is happy with the actions that have been taken. FA41 Building Risk Review and Protection Update. Chairman requested a briefing for members on the Building Safety Act. The relevant officer has agreed to do this. Wasn't available today as a witness in court proceedings, but we will be sorting out a member briefing on that act. That, I think, is all of the matters arising. Welcome, Councillor Lambert. That moves us on to item number 5. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
That right? Chairman, you referred to the Wycombe Fire Station, but skirted right over it. I had corresponded with Councillor Matthew Walsh over the thing. I believe that's a report on the structure and the building. Is that correct? Because you skirted over it, and he was going to look again in his correspondence to me. Is that something different? But you went so quickly over it, I didn't gather exactly what it was you were talking about.
So the action that I was updating on is the one that you initially triggered. Back in, I think it was potentially the October-November meeting. Hang on, let me answer, but then I can come back to me. Councillor Walsh gave a verbal update at the last meeting, and what we committed as a follow-up action is some of the improvements that were set in train following that visit is going to provide a further update at the end of March. So that's the action. It's not to do with the structural elements of the building.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sure Councillor Walsh will send me advance sight of that, because I did raise it in the first place and did go and meet them, and I'll be very appreciative of that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's coming to the full authority, so you will see it through that. Okay, moving on to disclosure of interests. Are there any pecuniary interests that members wish to declare? Take that as a no. Thank you. That moves us on to Chairman's announcements, which were circulated in advance and are on your desks. There is just one item that I just wanted to pick up and update members on. And That relates to the ongoing discussions between national employers and employee representatives in terms of pay negotiations. You'll be aware that the FBU undertook a ballot that met the thresholds for potential strike action. There's been a number of discussions through the month of January leading up to a revised national employers proposal. That was put, both myself and the Chief Fire Officer took part in those discussions with national employers. And I shared with members separately that an offer was made of a 7% uplift to Grey Book employees for the 2022-23 year and a 5% uplift for the 23-24 year. Since that offer was made, the FBU have confirmed that they will undertake a consultative ballot with their members, and that no strike action will be taken whilst that's underway. And indeed, I think I shared with members, I did share with members that the FBU executive has indicated that it will be advising members that they should accept that settlement. I just wanted to place on record the fact that I know I'm not alone in being pleased that hopefully that means that we are in a position where we'll avoid industrial action. I think none of us in this authority wanted that, and we've worked very hard locally under the leadership of the Chief Fire Officer to make sure that our relationship with the FBU in particular has maintained good local relations. I think hopefully once that consultative ballot is completed, which I think is completing on the 10th of March, it will enable us as a fire authority to move forward and enable us to focus on things like transformation of the service. We're going to cover some of the budgetary impact when we get to the medium-term financial plan, so I'll save any comments for that bit, but I just wanted to stress a couple of things before I hand over to the Chief Fire Officer. Firstly, we've always said that we would support whatever national employers did in terms of offer, and that certainly is the case, and you'll see that's been reflected in our budget. And secondly, all the way through this, I've been really clear, both with the FBU and with the Chief Fire Officer, that no matter what was the case with the settlement, it was really important that we did all we could to protect the firefighter numbers that we've been working hard to deliver across the authority, which again we'll cover through the medium-term financial plan. And I'm pleased that we've got to a place where we're able to achieve both of those aims. So that, I think, is just what I wanted to say on the settlement discussions. Chief Fire Officer.
Only just to welcome the offer and also welcome the consultative ballot. I think it's a positive move from both sides. Our firefighters, our staff do need a pay rise if you look at inflation, etc. So we're really pleased with the offer, and I'm hoping that members of the FBU accept it. And also, actually, in terms of just picking up what the chairman's just said about as well, we will still be able to maintain the aspiration to get to 300 in terms of uniform staff as we move forward. We made that commitment, and we'll, regardless of the 7 and the 5, we will still continue to try and strive to get to that number.
So just before I open up to members, just final point I want to make on it, which is just express my thanks to the Chief Fire Officer and the senior management team. A huge amount of work has gone on over the last few months, almost from the very first moment I became chairman, it was underway, to make sure that the authority and the service was in a position where it could deal with the challenges that any potential industrial action would undertake. And it's been very clear to me through the last few months that the work we've done, has been in really good shape versus work done nationally. So I just want to place on record my thanks to the Chief Fire Officer and other officers for their support, particularly Phil Mould, who, there we are, trying to find you in the big room. Thank you for the work you've done on briefing members and others. So I open up to any questions. Councillor Stutchbury.
Firstly, thank you very much for the officer team and the work being done on this. And I won't comment on the issue because I think while it's negotiations, it's incorrect to do so. Only just to seek clarity, this is nothing coming from central government to support this. It's a resourced issue. Any settlement will be resourced within house across country and not through government intervention financially. That is correct, isn't it?
So are you asking me if the settlement is as a result of government intervention?
I'm asking you, is there any government funding coming to settle this, which is quite different to government intervention? It's a very different topic. We could do hours about that, but I'm all lack of. But I'm trying to express clarity because I think it's important for the public to understand that it's been, I believe, you correct me, Chairman, that it's being resourced in-house across the country in various fire authorities, and the government haven't put anything on the table to bring forward the situation where we are.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Jessop, it might just be me, but I'm really struggling to hear you. So I don't know if perhaps move the mic a little bit nearer when you're speaking. That'd be really helpful. So apologies, I misunderstood what you're saying. So it's not quite, to clarify, it's not quite true that there's been no financial support, because one of the things that we're getting to when we do the medium-term financial plan and the budget are two elements that are important, which is preset flexibility and also increases in some of the revenue grants, which we'll talk through. That is enabling us to fund some of the additional increase. It is true that the fire service operates a national negotiation through the NJC, which is funded by, which is driven by fire authorities and PCCs and metropolitan mayors, and so those settlements are being funded out of the fire authority and similar budgets. But I do think it's important to recognise that what was pushed for as part of the discussions was for government to give authorities preset flexibility and to look at other grants, and that is going to enable us to support it. So, but we'll cover that when we get to the financial, the budget. Are there any other questions? We'll move on from that topic. Thank you, Councillor Stetchby. Are there any other questions on Chairman's announcements? No. Okay, that moves us to petitions. Do we have any petitions?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. Moves us to questions. Number 8 in the standing order SOA7. Do we have any questions?
None, Chairman.
Okay, that moves us to item number 9, which is recommendations from committees, in this case, Executive Committee. What I'm going to do is I'm conscious that Councillor Darlington needs to leave a bit earlier, and the really critical part of this agenda is item number B, the medium-term financial plan. So what I'm going to do is move item B first, and then we'll move to item A, the Prudential Code, afterwards. So I hand over to Councillor Walsh to introduce item B, the medium-term financial plan.
Thank you, Chair. As we discussed in significant detail at Executive Committee, this is a budget that is a combination of a huge amount of work, predominantly from the officer team, with a huge amount of contributions as well from lead members and group leaders. It's a budget that sets the chairman's strategic vision going forward for transformation that, as we have discussed previously, safeguards our plans for 300 full-time staff members, and obviously represents the pay award that has been proposed on a national level. There are some caveats that we must attach to that budget proposal. You know, we talk about government support. We were beneficiaries of the energy support scheme. That was nearly 450,000 during this financial year that we've not had to find elsewhere, which would be roughly equivalent to 2% on the pay award. We also have benefited, like you said, Chairman, from the CPI uplift and preset flexibility. So the financial position is better than it was, though we have a huge amount of risks. Utilities remain incredibly volatile at the moment, and if things were to change on the international markets, that could have a significant impact on the medium-term financial figures. But overall, the culmination of working together and as a team, we have really, I think, generated a budget that is the very best we can do, whilst also recognising the cost of living situation for our residents in terms of the precepts that we wish to set. But I'm sure the officers want to cover some more of the detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Asif.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members, colleagues. I'm here to present the medium-term financial plan today. So the revised appendices that have been presented to you today provide you with the latest positions for our revenue and capital medium-term financial plan. It has been a challenging year this year, with the inflation reaching sort of double figures and having a significant impact on our expenditure budgets. In setting this year's budget, we have considered the following and reflected in our medium-term financial plan. There has been a significant change in the council tax preset flexibility for fire and rescue authorities. The referendum threshold has increased from 2% to 3% throughout the NTFP. Furthermore, the government proposed additional preset flexibility to fire authorities to increase by £5 for 23-24 only. This additional flexibility was welcomed, and we have reflected it in our medium-term financial plan. Another positive is our collection funds tax base has been improving since the start of the pandemic. Some of you may recall our tax base actually reduced during pandemic, but we are now increasing and it's averaging at over 2%. Revenue support grant has also increased in line with CPI, which was in the region of around 10%, which was also positively welcomed. And we are also receiving a one-off grant related to the services grant in the region of around 200k that has again been reflected in our funding. However, there have been some negatives in terms of our funding that we've had to consider. So the filing grant is reducing by 20% every year, and we expect to receive no more filing grant from 24-25 onwards. Furthermore, in January this year, we were verbally notified that the grant funding related to urban search and rescue capability hosted in Aylesbury would come to an end at 31st of March 2024. And again, that's been reflected in our medium-term financial plan. If I could now take everyone to the revised appendices. Apologies, these have been revised again since last week, but these take into account the new pay offer and obviously the updated position in terms of utilities. So as members will be aware who were present last week, I gave the update in terms of the settlement funding assessment. So we had some good news in terms of NNDR coming in from Milton Keynes Council that has been reflected and increased our budgets for future years. We've also considered other areas as well. So we've also received some additional information from Buckinghamshire Council around council tax surplus. This wasn't available at the point of us producing these papers. That's an additional 145k that we have reflected in our MTFP for 1 year only. Now, the key bit that I want to bring everyone's attention to is the pay assumptions and utilities. As the chair highlighted earlier, we have revised our MTFP to reflect the new 7% and 5% pay award. And I must stress at this point, this pay award is for all staff groups when we've considered it. So it includes support and operational. Another key change that we've done is with the 7% and the 5% offer, we felt it was necessary to look at our future implications for pay, and we've uplifted that from 2% to 4% for the rest of the medium-term financial plan. Finally, the last bit that I wanted to touch on was utilities. Again, we had some really good news, and we've been able to lock in to a new 12-month contract earlier this week. We had originally set a budget of around 1.3 million. We're now looking at probably in the region of around 700 to 800k for utilities. I must stress though, this time last year, it was probably half of that. So it's still a significant increase that we're seeing. And there's obviously a lot of volatility as we've kind of tried to illustrate with the graph that's in the revised appendices. The prices are moving. We're fortunate that we've been able to lock in for the next 12 months. But beyond then, it's a bit of an unknown in terms of what utilities would look like. So we've got to be cautious when we are setting our budgets to kind of consider all possible scenarios. If I can now just take everyone to the last page of the revised appendices, which is the pay sensitivity. So what we've tried to show here is the implications of pay awards being more than 4% or less than 4%. Obviously, if they were to be 1% or 2% higher, you could see our reserves pretty much reducing by half. On the plus side, if our pay awards were to be less than 4%, our reserves would increase. I must stress at this point, it's difficult to kind of predict 12 months in advance, let alone it's called kind of 5 years in advance. But we are trying to give members the best available information that we have at present. And we do feel that these scenarios are quite realistic. And also in terms of affordability, as things currently stand, this is what we are saying is affordable for the service. But it's a bit of an unknown what may happen in terms of funding for future years. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Darlington.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, a huge thank you to Asif and his team. Trying to do any of this medium-term forecasting in this current environment is very, very difficult. As we all know, our councils are going through exactly the same thing. I wanted to raise two things that Asif, you rightly raised in your report, both the cut from Firelink and the cut for USAR funding. That equates to almost £1 million, isn't it? Almost £1 million cut to this fire authority from government funding. And that's a significant amount coming out of our budgets, but it's also the impact on our fire services, because particularly USAR is a service, a specialist service that really benefits our residents, but benefits the residents across the country. Now, I know we've raised this at Executive Committee, but and we are going to try and think about how we can save the service or a bit of the service. But the reality is, I don't think we're making enough fuss with government around it. I really think we do need to increase people's understanding about what financially that this cut will do to the authority as board business, but also the actual safety that brings into the safety for our residents and the wider region in actually being able to attend to those serious fire and rescues. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just address the USAR point, and then I'll hand to Chief Forest. And I don't know whether Asif wants anything else you want to add. So just in terms of USAR, I'm sorry that Councillor Darlington, you don't feel we're making enough fuss about it. Just to put on record, I think that it's important in these things that it's the outcome that matters, and the outcome is getting ourselves to a place where we are able to keep USAR. It's worth putting on record we haven't received formal notification that the USAR grant is being removed. We've also been very focused on influencing government, so both lots of strong support from Rob Butler MP, who attended USAR. You'll have seen in my chairman's announcements, attended USAR and saw for himself the team in operation, not least on a call as well. Well, he didn't go out on the call, but he saw them go out on a call. And there's been correspondence between Rob Butler and the Minister, as you know, because I shared it, I think, in Executive Committee. I've also had a conversation with the Minister, and there's also conversations that the Chief Forester can outline that he's been having with National Fire Chiefs Council. I think the important thing here is that we retain USAR. And I think often the most influential ways to do that are through the ways that we're doing it rather than big PR campaigns. And what we need to try and convey to the Home Office is that this is the wrong decision, because our USAR team is not only one of the best performing, it is by some distance one of the most efficient. And there are things about our operating model that we believe should be replicated across the country. And the authority has my absolute assurance, and hopefully members of the executive know this, that I'm very committed to doing all we can to protect it, and I've been making sure that other Bucks MPs are also aware of that. So please, nobody be under any illusions that we're doing all we can to protect you. So I think it's about style of influencing and approach that's probably the difference. Chief Forest, anything you want to add to that?
Nothing in terms of the lobbying, but also just to place on record my thanks to the USAR staff who continue to provide the service, even though this is hanging over them. My admiration for them knows no bounds, actually, in terms of local deployment or national deployment. Every single time they go out, the feedback is always excellent. And so it just needs for them to know that the authority as a whole, and myself as a part of the senior team, and the whole of the senior team, is trying to maintain that resource in Aylesbury, because that's where it needs to be.
Yeah, sorry, Simon, just to clarify, I wasn't saying that there wasn't unanimity on the exec committee. I know you and I are in exactly the same place, and as well, Stephen, there is cross-party unity on this. And I think my real worry is, I appreciate what you're doing, but there's not enough visibility across the board, I think, but also potentially across the two councils about what the impact this would mean in terms of Gold Command and others, and ensuring that potentially our two councils could also emphasise the views that the executive committee jointly hold. And I did want to come back to this point. I mean, Asif raised it, and it's one we can't kind of, between that and Firelink, that's £1 million out of the budget. We don't have a huge budget. And I think looking at what he's portrayed, that uncertainty over that funding, and you're right, we haven't received the official letter, which makes it even crazier to try and figure out what we're doing. But £1 million out of our budget is huge.
Yeah. So just to pick up on your point around the councils, which I think is a well-made point. So Councillor Tett actually visited Aylesbury and did a visit around the USAR team as well. And I know that Councillor Marland obviously is very familiar with the USAR team. So certainly from a Buckinghamshire perspective, they're aware of the implications, and I would be supportive of us looking at ways in which we can make sure that both councils are engaged in that activity. Just to pick up on the point around the budgets, which is again really well made point. I think we can all see the challenges, and I think officers have set out very clearly the volatility in there. One of the things that we are pushing for and continue to push for is ongoing preset flexibility in particular. One of the challenges is that it's a 1 year approach, which isn't helping us to plan. So just again, to reassure, that is certainly part of the national messaging going back, that we need ongoing preset flexibility. Councillor Stutchbury.
Yeah, well, thank you for what you've said.
Sorry, Councillor, sorry to interrupt. Are you sure? Okay.
I'll try and move. You seem to have trouble hearing me. Sorry for coming back again. You know, I've heard a lot of people you've met, a lot of people you've talked to, and a lot of names. That's all very good, but I want to see what the risk assessment is and what the quantity is about if this service is lost. It's quite obvious it's been successful for what it does, and it's not just a Buckinghamshire centric service. It supports other people. I don't think the risk has been quantified, that if we remove that out, we went through a summer, didn't we, when we had fires. We went through years before that when we had floods. We've got lots of pressures on us. And as Councillor Darlington rightly signals, £1 million out of our budget at a time where we haven't received any support to meet our obligations after negotiations of a pay settlement is quite a burden to undertake. Now, I'm sure that polite conversations can carry on for a period, and you rightly said that there's been no official statement, but it's been cited in the meeting that this is a possibility. And when there's a possibility, that's a risk. And I haven't seen, and maybe the executive committee did see this, the risk analysis on what happens across Buckinghamshire, which we can only talk about, but the risk to other places. And I would hope that our MPs, beyond the ones cited, is interested in it, because quite frankly, the alternatives, when it's gone discussing why we haven't got it, is going to be far worse, and recreating a service is far more expensive than maintaining it. So I'm sorry if I'm not quite as relaxed as you would imagine I'd be about these things, which I wouldn't be, but I do think that £1 million and all these things are a risk. And is there a risk assessment for this?
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. I'm perfectly okay with you being relaxed or unrelaxed. It's a perfectly fair point. Chief Forrester, do you want to just outline on the risk assessment point?
Yeah. So far, we've had no correspondence from the Home Office to indicate that we're losing the USAR team. We've only had an informal meeting with National Fire Chiefs Council, who identified that we were one of the teams. We've not yet seen the risk assessments or from the Home Office. We've not yet seen how the decision was arrived at and what things that they took into account when they decided that actually that this team should be one of the teams to go. So as soon as we have that, we'll do that risk assessment. Looking forward, regardless of the financial position, and the medium-term financial position plan sets out the financial position with the USAR, with us losing the USAR. So we've planned for the financial position. In terms of the risk position, this has got to be encompassed into the community risk management plan. The service needs a heavy rescue facility. There are other fire and rescue services within our area, in the Thames Valley, for example, that base their response models on the fact that the USAR team are available in Aylesbury. That's included in their community risk management plans. Going forward, regardless of is the financial position, but going forward, we will have to find ways, in my view, of keeping some form of heavy rescue response for the communities of Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. And we will come forward with plans for that within the community risk management plan, but also once we've got official confirmation that the team is going. I take the point, Councillor Darlington and Councillor Rouse both raise really good points, and it's great to see cross-party support on keeping this facility in Aylesbury for the purposes of heavy rescue response in terms of Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. But as soon as we've got them, as soon as we've got the details, I think the first instance is when we get the letter, the first thing I will be doing is saying, what is the risk assessment that says that you should be removing the Aylesbury team? When an example would be when Rob Butler visited Aylesbury, they were mobilised to Oxfordshire, and the two nearest teams were the West Midlands and Essex. So we will take that risk assessment and we'll bring that to members.
Thank you very much, Chief. I'm grateful for that.
Councillor Stutchbury, thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, you've made your points. Moving on to Councillor
I've
Lambert.
never have made me.
Councillor Stutchbury, thank you. Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. Formally put my identical words to everything that the Chief Officer, Councillor Rouse and Councillor Darlington have said about urban search and rescue. With my former hat on as the people lead, if I recall, these are establishment. They're not a separate team. They are part of our establishment, and they USAR arose out of terrorism attacks. As far as I know, the state of the nation and its threat levels haven't greatly changed since that point. But even very locally, as the fire chief was just pointing out, the service is used in many different ways, not just about those major incidents. There is a requirement for this capability. So I think the argument, all power to everyone's elbows at raising this in every avenue that we can and make it quite clear. And I agree with everything that's been said. So I just wanted to make that point. I am completely concerned with that. I support the £5 increase. I absolutely think for many years we have argued the case that we needed that preset flexibility, but as a minimum we used to argue for a £5 for fire, and we were always knocked back, and that really destabilised the service in terms of future planning for people and getting up to the establishment that we need and for managing the IRMP. So I'm glad that it's here, and look at the forward projections about preset flexibility. I mean, it's noted the referendum threshold change from 2 to 3%. I welcome that also, because that still gives us a level of flexibility that we didn't have before. I recommend. I've recognised the use of the reserves that we have in there and how we're going to have to do that. As if that's really well explained. Thank you very much. For me, moving back up towards our aim, our aspiration of 300, I think is really important. We can't take our eyes off that prize. Equally, though, we have so many other pressures in there, and I welcome the agreement of the energy contract, for example, that fixes our prices, so we know where we're operating in the next year. And as if you were right, forecasting for 1 year is hard. Forecasting for 5 years is almost worse than crystal balls. Even you can literally make it up as you go along, input whatever you like in there, really. But we're in a really hard situation nationally and locally as a service, money wise. So I welcome the settlement also with a potential settlement subject to all the agreements and votes and everything else like that around pay. Welcome what you were saying, Asif, about the affordability of that and how it can be profiled, as well as what the chief said. So with this, gets my vote completely, and it gets my support entirely around urban search and rescue, moving up to the 300 establishment, as also all the other aspects around how this budget is built. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to support Councillor Lambert's point around the fiver, if I could just draw members' attention to page 48 of the packs and paragraph 8.2. As the Chief Finance Officer, I'm required to report on the robustness of the estimates made and also the adequacy of the financial reserves. I'll just point out and highlight to members that my assessment that the reserves are adequate and sustainable is based on members approving recommendation to increase the council tax by £5. Should that not be the case, then my professional opinion would be that the reserves aren't sustainable.
Thank you for that clarification. So just not seeing any other hands, just some final points from me before we move to the vote. So firstly, I just wanted to place on record my thanks to officers. I know that this was the first time the officers took some members, including myself, through the budget for the first time, and I know we took a slightly different approach than would have been the case in the past, but I think it's got us to a really good outcome. And in particular, I was really pleased that we've got a number of efficiencies being driven through the service that aren't impacting upon frontline service delivery, and that's a really important principle for us to keep working on. One of the objectives that we set out at the beginning of this year was that we wanted to make sure that the finances moved to a sustainable footing, and that sustainable footing is clearly built upon our reserves. And again, some excellent work from officers to get us to a place where that reserves picture that you can see on the revised appendices and on page 44 enables us to start to think about transformation. And just wanted to say to officers that I know we still have some uncertainties, not least the USAR. but I'm really keen now, particularly that the pay settlement looks like it's heading to a positive conclusion, that we start to really look at how we use the reserves picture to support transformation of the service. And you'll have certainly my support, and I know that of members, to bring those proposals to us. And then just the final point that I wanted to make. I think in an earlier version of the papers that I saw, we had what was the longer term outlook for the whole time establishment picture. We don't need to go through that now, but I know we're in good shape to be close to the 300 for this year, and I know there's a lot of work going on making sure we close that gap. What I'd find helpful as part of the transformation of reserves is also to look at what we think that future outlook for whole time could look like, and how again that sits within the overall community risk plan process that we've kicked off. So if I could just perhaps ask the Chief and Assistant Chief to make sure that that forms part of the transformation story that we look at. So on this item, we're moving to a recorded vote. So I draw members' attention to the recommendations that are on page 39. So the recommendations are that the report and statement of the Chief Finance Officer, Section 8 of Annex A, be noted. And we've also just heard a verbal confirmation as well from the Chief Finance Officer. A council tax precept of £77.16 for Band D equivalent property, equal to an increase of 10p per week, and the revenue budget as set out in Appendix 1 be approved, and the capital programme as set out in Appendix 2 be approved. We're going to take those recommendations en bloc, and I'll hand over to Graham to lead the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll go through a roll call by way of surname alphabetical order. When your name is called, please can you indicate whether you are for, against or abstain? Councillor Ado. Thank you. Councillor Darlington. Thank you. Councillor Exon. Thank you. Councillor Hall. Thank you. Councillor Hopkins. Thank you. Councillor Lambert. Councillor Mahendran. Thank you. Councillor McLean. Thank you. Councillor Rouse. Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury. Thank you. Councillor Waite. Thank you. Councillor Walsh. Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on to item A in your agendas, the Prudential Code, Prudential Indicators and Minimum Revenue Position. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll hand over directly to Marcus. Sorry, thank you.
Marcus, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, members and officers. Today I'll be presenting you with the Prudential Code, Prudential Indicators and Minimum Revenue Provision for 23-24. This is a technical paper and is presented annually to this committee to approve the recommendations. This paper supports the medium-term financial plan, which has already been presented at today's meeting. The Prudential Code was established to ensure that the capital investments are affordable, prudent and sustainable, and that the Treasury management decisions are taken in accordance with good professional practice. The potential indicators presented here demonstrate that the current plans for capital investment meet these criteria and present an acceptable level of risk for the authority. Minimum revenue provision is a statutory charge to a general fund which ensures that the authority has sufficient cash balances to repay borrowing on maturity, reducing the refinancing risk. Since 2015-16, there have been sufficient funds set aside to cover the repayment of long-term borrowing. This can be seen in a background paper. Historically, early repayment on these loans has not been an option due to the prohibitive penalties on early repayment. However, due to the rise in interest rates since December 2021, it may be more feasible to repay some of our long-term borrowing early. Officers are authorised to make early repayments within the prudential limits, where, having consulted with Treasury advisors, there is an opportunity to do this on beneficial terms. Officers will discuss any early repayments with their finance lead member, Councillor Walsh, before any final decisions are made. There are currently no plans for additional borrowing according to the MTFP. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions on this item from members? Okay, as somebody that I do find papers like this interesting, which might be a slight weird foible of mine. I just wanted to thank officers. It's a very well laid out paper and very clear. So thank you for it. I think just the more I've reflected on the delegation to officers around the debt repayment, which I totally understand. I think the only additional item I would ask is that at the right point, that's also reported if action's taken to executive committee, just so we're aware, which I know you do, but just to confirm. Thank you, getting a nod in support. So members are being asked to approve the prudential indicators for 23-24 and also being asked to approve the minimum revenue provision policy statement. Are members happy to do that? Thank you. That moves us on to item C, which is members' allowances. I know I speak for all members when I say that this is something that none of us enjoy talking about. And we had a discussion at the executive committee last week in relation to this paper, which at that time was also against the backdrop of an unresolved pay settlement discussion. And I think the view of executive committee was that it wasn't appropriate for members' allowances to be changed whilst that pay settlement discussion was underway. And I think there was also a strong view across executive committee, across groups, that we needed to move to a position where members weren't involved in setting their own allowances. And as a result, the executive committee made the following recommendation to the Fire Authority, which is we moved an amendment that was moved and seconded, that a scheme of members' allowances for 23-24 be adopted index linked to the 22-23 Grey Book pay award. And for clarity, that means that that pay award would need to be fully settled before it's applied. So I just wanted to draw members' attention. That's the proposal, that we remove members' involvement in setting the levels and we directly link it to the Grey Book, and effectively the 22-23 pay award be what is then applied for the 23-24 member allowances programme. I think I've got that right. That's very good. Any comments, particularly Councillor Darlington and Lambert, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with your comments. I think it's not the right approach that we have to vote on our own allowances, but that is what the legal framework says we have to do. Therefore, I think what we need to do is stand shoulder to shoulder with our team, who we try and support. And therefore, if we are to receive an increase in our allowances, it's to be absolutely linked to them, and we should only receive that increase once they are receiving their increased pay award. And I think that's only the right way to go forward with that, because I know our approach on the board is very much, it's not an us and them situation. We are a team providing fire and rescue across Milton Keynes and Bucks, and therefore this is the right way to go forward as a team. Thanks.
Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely 100% agree with Councillor Darlington there, and yourself, and the words that were read out there by yourself about this. There's the appropriateness of what it looks like, how it feels with our staff, with our colleagues, about how it works, what it looks like to the public, as well as, having this differential. We can settle our agreement, we can't settle any other agreement, and then So now that one aspect is completed, it takes this, I want to use the word sting out of us having to do that separately. And of course, it does show that unanimity across all three parties. There was unanimity about how that should look and be approached, but it's unanimity of the Fire Authority members along with our staff. I think that is really important in the whole national scheme of the cost of living crisis and the way that people are approaching settling pay and agreements. So this has entirely the Liberal Democrat group backing on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. So on that basis, members are being asked to approve that scheme of members' allowances for 23-24 be adopted, index linked to the 22-23 Grey Book pay award. Members happy to approve that? Unanimous. Thank you. That moves us on to item number 10, pay principles and statement 20. Okay, thank you. No worries. Thank you, Councillor Darlington. Sorry, I've lost my thread. Yeah, pay policy principles and statement 23-24. Councillor Hall to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'll introduce the report. It's on page 111 of your pack. You've all had an opportunity to look at it. We need to make a decision on the 2 recommendations. So I'll ask Faye to talk to it, please.
Good morning to everybody. The pay policy is required to be updated each financial year and is being presented to the Fire Authority today for approval as the 2023-24 pay policy for the authority effective the 1st of April 23. The pay policy is based on the current 22-23 pay policy and has been updated with minor amendments where minor amendments were made where appropriate, as detailed with red and underlined or struck through. Looking at specific sections of the pay policy and the pay multiples and the ratios of the highest to lowest pay, it continues to fall for the 11th year, seeing this 11th year ratio improving by 34% since first reporting in 2012, which is good to see. However, it's important to note that the reduction is due to the fact that no pay increases have been put through for the highest salary. However, the lowest, so the national living wage, has seen an increase. Apart from the yearly updates to figures, the other changes within the 2023-24 pay policy include Section 7, where brigade managers has been replaced with senior manager roles, as this is more in keeping with the terminology used within the service. And for transparency purposes, this section also details the limited number of senior manager roles that Gold Book applies to. Section 9 and pay progression for SMB members, the wording has been amended to state progression through the pay grades will be based on evidence performance and at least 6 months in post, rather than making reference to the increase to salary after completion of the annual SMB remuneration performance review process. And Section 10, the removal of reference to the 5 pension schemes, with this pay policy only making reference to the 2015 firefighters pension scheme and the local government pension scheme. And throughout the document, reference to bonus payments has also been removed. The cover paper makes a note to the government continuing their discussions on exit payments and the consultation undertaken during 2022. This consultation was to seek views on proposed guidance and processes prescribing additional reporting requirements and increased scrutiny and assurance on exit decisions, to reduce the use of large exit payments in public sector and to improve consistency and accountability in decision making. It's the government's intention to ensure that a comprehensive and effective set of controls are in place across the public sector, and it's anticipated an exit payment cap or similar will be reintroduced in some form, and we will await decisions on any regulation changes and implementation dates. It is therefore recommended that the pay policy as outlined in Appendix 1 is approved as the authority's 2023-24 pay policy for the authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. Not necessarily a question, but his entire support of having the scars on my back for going through this with Faye and the team over many years. The changes that are in here are absolutely great. Where we were aspiring to go in terms of some terminology that was in there, in terms of the word bonus payment, for example, but also to recognise the work of you and your team, Faye, and Councillor Hall for doing this. This isn't an easy one. It's some people would look at it as a piece of dry old toast, to be quite honest. Actually, it's the framework that everything hangs off of. So good to see the median has changed, but there is the counter to why the median changes, as you pointed out. So I'm mindful of what that looks like, because that could also look like we have shrunk the pay of certain grades or removed certain grades or levels to shrink that gap. So I know what we've done, so I appreciate that. It's just worth flagging that there are always the counter to these figures. It looks good since 2012, but there is a whole lot of changes in the structure that's got to us at that as well. But it is a determined journey to close that gap and to bring it into the median that we aspired to make it. So I support the paper. Thank you. So it's not a question. It was a comment of support, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Just seek assurance through you, Chairman, that why hopefully agree in this policy that we have been fully engaged in making sure that no specific groups, sections of workers and firefighters are disadvantaged through this being agreed. I think it's important we say that, and I think that's primarily where we should be. Why we have an open situation on pay, which we all look forward to hopefully being resolved. But secondly to that, I hold my breath a little bit when comments about government bringing in standards across board, because we could go into long discussions about standards and government, but that's not what we're here for today. But I seek assurance on the first point from you that that is the case, and the chief as well. Thank you.
Sorry, could you just clarify what the final confirmation you wanted from me was?
Well, I think it was pretty clear to you, but I always like to talk again, so you give me opportunities, so I will do. The fact is that I sought to understanding that no individual groups within the fire authority, employees and firefighters, were disadvantaged unduly by agreeing this. And then I threw a barb in about the fact that I found it rich that the government were looking in standards, but I thought that's basically what I said, and you missed the first point for the second one, and which was much more fun than the first one. Thank you.
So I did get the first point. It's the second point I didn't understand, and you're right, it's not relevant for the fire authority. So I don't think it's actually for me, Councillor Stutchbury, to give you assurance. What I would, I think it's for the fire authority to ensure all members of the fire authority get assurance of that. And what I draw your attention to, and actually I do have a separate question on this, is page 128, which is the equality impact assessment, which is currently showing a neutral impact. So I think my encouragement to members is that for that sort of assurance, I think it's right that we ask officers to take us through that. One thing I just wanted to personally clarify is, so I welcome the reducing gap that you've talked about from high to medium salary. On the equality impact assessment, you rightly referred to the gender pay gap report as the vehicle by which we'll test any issues there. And I think we also, just as a course of good practice, should also look at race disparity as well. But could you just, just remind me the timings of when we will see the gender pay report? And I don't know, it may be an unfair opportunity to pick up on Councillor Stutchbury's point. Just take us through the impact assessment process that you took on salary and how we satisfied ourselves that we weren't indeed disadvantaging any groups.
So the gender pay gap report will be going to the executive committee in March of this year. And with regards to the equality impact assessment, because there's no specific impacts identified with any of the areas, that's why it was detailed as such within this report, because this is more of a general report for the fire authority rather than specifically looking at the individual characteristics, or the individual areas within the EDI equality impact assessment. Sorry.
Thank you. Does that gender pay report, it's probably a question for Graham, does that get reported by executive to the full authority, or does that just remain with the executive committee?
From recollection, it goes to the executive and it gets approved to be published on the .gov website. So I think, to pick up on your point, Councillor Stutchbury, what I'll commit that we do is when executive committee covers that gender pay report, we'll also make sure that we note, probably through chairman's announcements, any issues that we discuss at executive committee if it's not being reported. Any?
They usually are. That as chairman, you'll get all that in advance, as will Gary. Yeah.
Any other questions on the pay policy? Okay, in which case, take members to the recommendations. So the pay policy principles and statement as set out in Appendix 1 as the statutory pay policy pay policy statement for 23-24 is approved for publication. And secondly, the authority notes the pay multiple ratio continues to fall for the 11th year running, with the 11th year period seeing the ratio improved by 34% since 2012. Are we happy to approve the publication and note the pay multiple ratio? Thank you. Moving on to item number 11, Treasury Management Strategy 23-24, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. As I outlined at executive, but for the benefit of the full fire authority, I conducted a deep dive review exercise with the Deputy Finance Director and Marcus, which was very useful on this position. Officers must be given a significant amount of credit for the job they have achieved with our Treasury management since bringing it in-house. It's run very efficiently and has generated, bar COVID, substantial returns for the authority year on year. But I will hand over to Marcus for a more detailed assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Today I'll be presenting you with the Treasury Management Strategy for 23-24, which includes a statement in relation to the Treasury Management Policy, the Treasury Management Strategy and the Annual Investment Strategy. This paper, excuse me, this paper also supports the medium-term financial plan, which is already presented at today's meeting. There are no significant changes to the strategy, and officers will continue to invest surplus funds in secure short-term deposits maturing on a frequent basis, while ensuring the authority can maintain adequate liquidity to meet short-term expenditure requirements. I will, however, highlight members' attention to the following. Our current borrowing position as of the 31st of December 2022 includes loans of 6.177 million with an average interest rate of 4.64 million and annual interest payable of 283k. In May 2022, the authority repaid a maturing loan when it was due of 620,000. The next maturing loan is March 2024 and is for £1 million. These repayments do not directly impact the revenue budgets, and funds have been set aside to ensure we can repay loans when due. I won't go over about early repayments, as we already mentioned that in the previous paper. In terms of our current investment position as of the 31st of December 2022, includes investment and bank balances of 17.598 million, averaging 1.56% interest between April and December. The investment portfolio includes £2 million investments in sustainable deposits after we've had lengthy discussions with our Treasury advisors, and officers will continue to explore these sustainable development investments when these mature. So for the first time since Treasury Management was taken in-house, we actually will be achieving more income than expenses going out in terms of interest payable and receivables, which is a good marker there. In terms of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, as you will be aware, they've increased the base rate on 10 consecutive occasions since December 21 and is now currently at 4%. This has resulted in the level of investment returns for the authority, and therefore we've now been able to increase the budget for 2023-24 to 350k. And this we should be quite comfortable to achieve that. And this figure has been reflected in GFP. Our Treasury advisors are forecasting for the interest base rate to peak at 4.5%, and this can be seen in Appendix 3. Within this strategy, I've included Appendix 4, which provides the credit rating definitions for the 3 rating agency services that we use. During 23-24, officers will continue to monitor the Treasury Management performance, and this will be reported to the Overview and Audit Committee. I thank you and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. It's 2 questions, actually. Firstly, when you read 142, 143, which is Appendix 2, and the red ratings, and I understand where we came from in terms of the policy for using non-UK banks and investment vehicles. My question is the amount of reds that we have in the non-UK based counterparties and the kind of risk thresholds that are there. It's so many of the UK ones are red, so few appear to be for the non-UK ones, and I understand the market, understand that aspect of it, but my question is about how you evidence and track those changes, and so whether you move more out of the UK as opposed to, because they're more greens and oranges than reds. That makes a sensible question there. I mean, I'm probably not articulating it very well. It's about the risk profile.
So, and in terms of our, we receive weekly notifications from our Treasury advisors of all of our counterparties and any movements that have happened in their ratings. And if they do happen, we receive them instantly. In terms of our current investments, we've got no investments outside of the UK. They're all UK based, and we do have a threshold of plus 6 months on top of what the investments are. And we've today, touch wood, they've not failed to return our investments.
I'm sure somebody said that in 2007, but that's just a flippant joke. I don't mean that at all. Because the question, where my first question was really coming from is the new digital currencies that are being talked about, the reserve currencies, sorry, that are being talked about. That's something that is obviously coming down the line with the US Federal Reserve and the UK Bank of England looking at things like that as well. At some point, we're going to have to address whether we use those investment vehicles as well, whatever they look like. It's just, is that on your radar? Is that something that you would recommend at some, not recommend us to use, but in terms of investigating?
Yeah, I think in terms of those investment products, that's probably a little bit early at the moment. Obviously, we'll keep those under review and we'll speak to our Treasury advisors on a regular basis. And we'll obviously do a full risk assessment, because whenever you invest with Treasury, the primary purpose of local authority Treasury investment is security. And that's what we'd really need to make sure we've got that before any other considerations. So something we'll keep under review, but it's probably way too early to be talking about it, I think, at this stage.
Soon. Thank you.
Councillor Stetcher, did you see your hand?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the officers for the report. I look forward to the part of it coming back to audit where we can question it in a little bit more detail. But just for clarity, what was the impact of the fiscal experiment of the interloping or the interim Prime Minister on our long-term planning, and has it been negative? Has it been positive, and how did it affect your modelling of this? Because we know you mentioned a 4.5% possible interest rate. What were we modelling it at before that period in time? Probably quite a lot lower. And there is benefits in high interest rates, that we earn more money, but it costs us more to do other things that we do. So I think we do need to quantify what the difference and what the cost to the authority has been of that challenge in the markets which took place before the present Prime Minister. Thank you.
Mark.
I think in terms of the impact for a longer term Treasury strategy, that probably had very little impact. It was more of a little blip in the market. And as you know, actually all our borrowing is on fixed rates of interest. So that doesn't change whenever interest rates change. But when the interest rate goes up, because our investments we place on regular basis for a range of maturities, that is obviously a benefit to the authority. So in terms of the impact of the mini budget, as you've called it, I think that's probably negligible in terms of the longer term Treasury strategy.
Reassuring to know that it didn't actually impact on us. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Wow, that's good. Thank you very much. I must apologize, I came late earlier. I'm just wondering, with all the good work that we're doing, and so much is going on, the strategies, the policies, I'm just wondering, how do the staff get to know about what's going on and how? I'm just looking at these investments and the interest and what's, I'm just thinking, do colleagues know about this? Do the staff know? And how often are they updated on what's going on?
Chief Forrest?
Yes, we try and we update staff a lot. I do a lot of vlogs. I'm following this fire authority. I'll be doing a vlog tomorrow to update staff. In terms of that, obviously we screen the authority meetings, but we always try to give the good news as much as we possibly can, or even the not so good news. But we do regular interactions with vlogs. We do station visits. We do all sorts of different things. We do management team meetings, the broader leadership team meetings to disseminate information and future plans and take people's views. So we do try and do a lot. We can always do more, but actually in terms of, I feel as though we do try and get that message out there. But you're right in terms of what you say, actually, because one of the things I did note down, which is I don't very often get a chance to talk in my vlog about the Treasury management strategy. But this time I'm going to, because it's such a good news story. Because actually the financial position, as you quite rightly identify, with all of the good work that's going on behind the scenes, is improving for the authority. And that's really, really good news and really, really positive for the authority and the service to move forward.
Thank you. Can I just move to, just checking some other questions, move to just a question, actually two questions from me, one of which we touched on a little bit, but on page 136, paragraph referring to the prospects for interest rates and then the benchmark that we set, clearly that interest base rate is now slightly out of date, but we're still setting a benchmark, a target benchmark of 2%. And I recognise in previous year, I think we hit 2.6. Yes, 2.6. just to test that. So given that that benchmark rate looks slightly under ambitious when you look at the trend now for base rate, just talk to us a little bit about how Link work with you with some of the movement on interest rates to make sure that our target is sufficiently ambitious for the authority.
Yeah, I think just a couple of points on that, Chairman. I think as accountants, we always take a slightly prudent approach. I'd always rather slightly underestimate than slightly overestimate the amount of income we're going to get. And I think the other point to note is it's always going to lag slightly. So because we do investments over a range of maturities, we've already locked in a number of rates at perhaps a lower rate before the rate of interest increased, especially when the interest rate is going up so quickly, there is going to be more of a lag. But likewise, conversely, as interest rates start to drop, there'll be a positive lag in that we're still in achieving a higher rate of interest as the rate starts dropping, because we've locked in those longer term deals, because if you have to lock in the longer term deals to get the better rates. So hopefully we will achieve more than that, and obviously we're reporting that throughout the year. Generally, as you've kind of seen through kind of the quarterly reports, we generally do overachieve the targets, and I'd hope to do the same again. So it's working with the Treasury advisors to try and get a kind of a prudent benchmark for that rate of return, but obviously one we look to try and exceed as we go throughout the year.
Thank you. That's helpful. I mean, the bit I would just say is it's of course right that we're prudent, but it's also right that we make sure that we're also looking at it in an absolute sense against what the opportunity would have been. And I think I look at this in a different context on the Buckinghamshire Authority, which is just making sure that we are happy that Link are enabling us to manage in that volatile environment to the level that we'd want. And I'd just be interested in understanding that benchmark. And then it just moves me to the second point, which I can't remember, I think it was Councillor Slutchbury actually no, I think it was Councillor Lambert was referring to the international or non-UK based counterparties. And again, certainly at Buckinghamshire, we've taken a very risk-averse view of non-UK counterparties. And again, just to give members assurance, could you just talk us through the steps that would be taken before we would move any of our money into non-UK counterparties, just to give us some assurance on that?
Yeah, the non-UK counterparties are really there just to give us that extra capacity, because you don't want to put too many of your investments with one counterparty just to spread the risk of counterparty failure. As Marcus alluded to, we've never had to use them, and we don't anticipate using them. And again, it'd be a consultation, I think, with the lead member around that. And just to reassure members, these counterparties undergo the same level of scrutiny in terms of how our Treasury advisors assess the risk as they would with any UK-based counterparty. So where it's rated the same as UK counterparty, it is in a sense the same risk, regardless of whether it's UK-based or non-UK-based.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other hands, so move to members' attention to the recommendation, which is that the authority approve the Treasury Management Policy Statement, Treasury Management Strategy Statement, and the Annual Investment Strategy for 23-24. Members happy to approve? Thank you. Moves us on to the Buckinghamshire Milton Keynes Borough Authority Apprenticeship Programme update, which I asked to be brought to the authority. I'll make some comments after it's been introduced, but I'll hand over to Anna, who's going to talk us through it.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think we've just moved into the afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. This paper presents an update to members on the authority's apprenticeship programme, our current funding arrangements, funding future opportunities, and provides me with the opportunity to present this good news story. My approach with this update is to showcase our excellent programme and the positive impact it has had on all staff, whether that be recruiting new staff or upskilling existing staff. For new members, I've provided an overview of our apprenticeship journey, the range of apprenticeship subjects that we have or have had staff enrolled on, and have then brought it up to date with the current numbers enrolled on programmes and our future plans. I have provided detail on our levy payments and spending, making sure to highlight that because we have been so effective in fully utilising our levy, we have now entered into co-funding arrangements with the Department of Education, where they fund 95% of our apprenticeship cost and the authority funds the other 5%. The Organisational Development Department are currently exploring other potential funding options. It is possible for levy-paying employers to transfer a percentage of their unused levy funds to other employers. The team have reached out to local colleges within Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, who we deliver our apprenticeship programmes through, as well as other fire services, to determine if this would be a viable option to the authority. I have also provided the enrolment numbers, which show the authority has consistently exceeded the public sector target of 2.3% of its workforce in new starts each year. Last week was National Apprenticeship Week, and hopefully members saw that working with our comms team, we ran case studies on all our social media platforms of current apprentices in various roles across the organisation and the positive experiences they are having. Staff from Learning and Development and HR also attended the NFCC National Apprenticeship Conference last week, speaking with other services on how they recruit, train and deliver their apprenticeships. The feedback I've received is that there is more we can be doing to elevate our programme to even higher levels, and that those who attended the conference are eager to start exploring what we can do with those learns. This update showcases the success of the authority's apprenticeship programme, the level of investment in new and existing staff across the service, and how it can enable succession planning, resilience, and future-proofing by recruiting and training apprentices into a number of roles across the organisation. The energy, enthusiasm, and diversity of thought that the apprentices bring into the roles benefits the organisation, whilst enabling us to show them what we can offer as an employer and a career within the fire and rescue service. Our apprenticeship programme is something the authority can be really proud of because we who deliver it are. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just before I open it up to questions and comments from members, just want to say a few things. So, firstly, I'm said this at the executive, but worth repeating here that a lot of my professional experience in the last few years has been in the apprenticeship sector, and I have to say that the performance of the service with new starts is against the national government target is the best that I have seen, and the service should be incredibly proud of that. And what I think is really striking is not only the volume, but the mix of apprenticeships that are being delivered. And I just wanted to add my congratulations to the way that the service conducted itself through National Apprenticeship Week. I thought the social media was absolutely superb. For members that haven't seen it, there were some excellent case studies showing both diversity in terms of gender. There was an excellent neurodiversity case study as well that was shown. So really good work, and I'm really pleased that we embraced National Apprenticeship Week as well as we did. Just two quick things I wanted to say. One of the reasons why I'm very passionate about apprenticeships is I think it's a really great vehicle for driving diversity in organisations, both in terms of age, but also other characteristics. So I think it'd be helpful in future reports if we could build in just some statistics in terms of what the population of individuals is that we're starting. One of the challenges in particular with apprenticeships is making sure that younger people in particular are accessing them. And I saw from the case studies that clearly we are doing that. So it'd just be really good to demonstrate that. And secondly, I would be, and I'm sure this is true of other members, I would be really supportive of a concerted effort from the authority and from the service in approaching large national employers in particular that are based in Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes to support us with levy transfer, because there is significant underspend with some of those larger employers. And I would be fairly confident, actually, if they could see a direct impact on community safety in the areas that they're based, they would be very supportive. So perhaps we can pick up as an action just to look at how the authority can support that, because against the challenge that we've got with whole time and elsewhere, I think it's a really important vehicle for us. So just not a great deal of challenge there, but just a lot of praise for the work that's been done. So thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. I want to frame Appendix 1. I love it. And 115 or so apprentices going through the system. When my predecessor and yours, Chairman, former Councillor Reid, took us down this route, there was some apprehension about how it's going to work. But this is amazing. Just like you, Chairman, it's like full of praise for this. And over my time, we looked at how we were recruiting firefighters, getting them into to replenish the levers, as it were, to look wider about how apprenticeships could be delivered in the public sector was truly amazing. And other fire services looked at us like, "You're doing what? How are you doing that?" and wanting a piece of the pie. And it was another demonstration of how this service puts itself out there, leads the way. We're one of the smallest services in the country, and some of the bigger services are looking at us going, "How look at that," and then taking or remodeling our work. So I just want to say I'm so proud of this, and to have this. I want to frame it. I absolutely do. Anna and the team, you've just done an astonishing job at this. Really, really well done, and hats off. And to all of our apprentices, really well done, because you're a shining light across Buckinghamshire and the rest of the service. I also agree with you, Chairman, about asking some of the other leading employers across Buckinghamshire, Milton Keynes. There is some great talent there in it, and they could absolutely, working together, imagine that co-branding, that co-working together, that we're all in this and succeed in helping apprentices, no matter what age, because you can be an apprentice at whatever age you like, and the different levels that are there. I'll stop eulogising. I'm wasting time now, but just saying, bloody well done.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
I'm not sure I can be quite as effusive as Councillor Lambert, but I'm not far behind. I think it's a great scheme we've been running for a number of years, and looking at the list of different skills and roles on page 151, because I think we probably think it's mainly the firefighters, but there are lots of other apprenticeships as well, which is great. I've attended 2 of the pass out parades for the apprentices, and I think it shows the overall impact on the community, because the pride that's shown by parents and family members that's attending the pass out parades is absolutely wonderful. And also in terms of working with the community, because it brings in a small way another organisation called Macmillan, because they do the catering, so they're a community organisation, so it's all round, and it's a great showcase for anyone who wants to join the service. So well done, everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you very much. I mean, a lot has been said on this, but I did an apprenticeship many years ago, and it's a very good thing to do, and it just gives you a bed in employment, whichever course you do. The great thing about this apprenticeship system is the fact that the local authorities' policies around diversity and employment and balance, in the fact that we try to bring people into the apprenticeship who wouldn't normally come, and that's an uplifter in society, and uplifting people to have abilities to be able to do things is a great thing. But we must not step away from thanking people, because it's always so often in life that we move forward and congratulate people, but we don't really thank them. This apprenticeship thing wouldn't have got off if it hadn't been for Jason and the team looking at this, and we should record our thanks for what they did in it. It also wouldn't have got off if the previous chairman, Councillor Leslie Clark, hadn't been involved and committed to it, and the previous members of those teams, and Councillor Peter Mallon and Councillor Steve Lambert. There was a shared vision about why we needed to get apprenticeships, and that shows you what a shared vision can do in turning what was quite a negative position into a positive position. And I think that those members should be grateful to themselves, and the staff should be grateful to the work they've done, and we should thank them. But going forward, what this will do, is there'll be a resource of well-trained, fully fledged with ability young people coming into the service, and will mean that we won't face similar problems to other areas when it comes to recruitment, hopefully going forward. So I think it's a good thing all round. But as I stated, I think it's important to thank people involved in it. It's quite often we sort of bathe in the sunshine of the present, but forget that other people were laid the foundations and the bricks that we stand upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to echo Collie's comments around the positivity of the apprenticeship scheme, you mentioned a couple of points, one about bringing young people through. We had an apprentice start in IT this week who's 16, and at certain points in your life where you suddenly feel very old, and 16 is almost the same age as my son, so it's brilliant that we're bringing through the next generation. But it did make me stop and think, wow, that really is the new generation, and I'm actually old enough to be your father. And just to pick up your point around social media and the comments around how good that is, a lot of that content was actually done by Addy, who is our digital marketing apprentice. So it's about apprentices by an apprentice. That's absolutely fantastic to see that coming through as well. So thank you for your comments on that.
Thank you. Good. Any other comments on the apprenticeship update? Okay, in which case we're being asked to note the contents. We're happy to do so. Thank you. Brings us on to item number 13, the Chartered for Families Bereaved Through Public Tragedy. As this paper relates to a proposal that the authority signs up to the Charter, I'll hand over to Graham just to talk us through it.
Thank you, Chairman, members. It is with great pleasure that I present this report to the authority, recommending that it sign up to the Charter for Families Bereaved Through Public Tragedy, the principles of which are enumerated on page 160 of your agenda pack, which actually is the back sheet of your agendas. The Chief Fire Officer and I have discussed its adoption on many occasions, and prior to the turbulence of the COVID pandemic and the changes of membership on the authority, it had been planned to table the recommendations in 2020. The proposals for adoption were reinvigorated by the attendance of the Right Reverend James Jones at a conference of the National Fire Chiefs Council at the end of November in 2022. Coincidentally, after this item had been added to today's agenda, the National Police Chiefs Council announced on the 31st of January its formal response to the Right Reverend James Jones's report, which, as set out in your agenda packs, was published in 2017. And it is referenced there for your perusal. This also led to the matter of bringing into legal effect some of the aspects of James Jones's report being raised in Parliament with cross-party backbench support. As set out in the cover report, the impact on the authority, from my perspective, will be minimal because many of the proposals within the principles are already underpinned in the Employees Code of Conduct and the complaints procedure. In terms of impact on officers, this will fall primarily on the leadership role of the Chief Fire Officer and the Deputy Chief Fire Officer and whoever is charged with managing litigation risk, which currently sits with me. For your information, the local FBU rep has seen a copy of the draft report and fully endorses its proposals and would be happy for the FBU to issue a joint statement via the authority's website. Nothing further to add, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to invite the Chief Fire Officer to say a few words on it.
Thank you very much, Graham. It's with mixed emotion that we bring this paper from a personal perspective. A lot of people may not know that a member of my family died at Hillsborough, and my family went through the whole family went through obviously the issues of Hillsborough and the trauma of that over the period, over decades. And I think what this paper does is that it brings, if on adoption, it brings the opportunity for families who are bereaved through public tragedy to understand what happened to their loved ones. And as I reflect back over the decades, and I think about my family member Vincent, all my family ever really wants to know, and my 89-year-old grandmother wants to know, was what happened to her son. And this paper enables authorities to be open and honest and transparent about what happened on the day of them public tragedies. That's one of the reasons that I would recommend endorsing it. The other position as well for me is that actually when we went through the hearings and we went through all the final court hearings and we found out how Vincent died, it wasn't until 29 years later, 30 years later, that our family for the first time realised that there was actually somebody with Vincent when he died, a police officer, who tried his best to save Vincent's life. And the family never ever got a chance to thank that police officer for his actions. And that police officer never ever knew the person that he tried to help. And so this paper pushes authorities to be open, transparent, and think about the families of those who are bereaved in tragedies that affect the public. It's really difficult for me to talk about this because I always think to myself about conflicts of interest, etc. So this is why I always ask Graham to talk to take it forward. But from a personal perspective, I couldn't be more open and more thinking in terms of hoping that the authority accept and endorse this approach moving forward.
Thank you, Jason. I think I'll speak for everyone. I say thank you for sharing that with us. It wasn't easy to do, but I really appreciate you doing so. Any other comments, questions from members? Councillor Stutchbury.
Firstly, can I thank Jason for his openness and honesty about this situation? I don't think it's wrong for him to share that. I think it's uplifting and quite tragic at the same time. But I think the reason we will endure and do take this forward is to very much prevent that misunderstanding, that grief continuing, and that thing going forward. If we were to say anything, this should have come forward 40 nearly years ago, and that is the tragedy to those families. But I think we're doing the right thing now, and I have no problem with supporting it. And I have thanked the chief for what he's expressed to us, and I think sharing your emotions around the subject is actually positive. And thank you for being so open.
Thank you. Any other comments? In which case, just one point I'd just like to make. I think it's really important when we do things like this, it's not just signing the charter that matters, it's making sure that that's then embedded in the way that we operate and how we think about things. And I think I've separately asked for us just to make sure that it's sufficiently reflected where needed through our articles as an authority, and I think it would be good to think about ways in which we can be regularly reminding ourselves about the expectations that signing the charter place upon us, so that it just doesn't get signed and forgotten. So perhaps as a separate action, the chief and I can just have a think alongside with Graham about how we make sure we embed that properly. Are members happy to adopt the recommendation that the Charter for Families Bereaved through Public Tragedy be adopted and be attested by the signatures of the Chairman and the Chief Fire Officer? Thank you. Okay, that moves us on to date of the next meeting, which is on Wednesday, the 14th of June, 2023 at 11 a.m. That will be the annual meeting. I can't believe it's come around that quickly. The annual meeting of the authority, which will be at the Oculus at Buckinghamshire Council. And there being no further business, I'll close the meeting there. Oh, sorry, Councillor McLean.
Can I just, I know we don't have any other business, I'm just delighted to note that the Thames Valley Police have moved in next to Newport Pagnell Fire Station. It's now operational as a base, which makes it a lot better for the people in the north of this borough.
Thank you. There clearly was some more business. So on the basis of no further business, I'll close the meeting now and we should be a safe journey home. Thank you, everybody.